Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. You may have noticed on the forum that forum member Chop Like Syed asked a little bit about how he could improve the consistency of his backhand kick, he called it, and the video that he gave to describe it called it a sort of a kick shot. How he could improve the consistency of this shot, and I'll include a link to the original video as well. But essentially what the stroke being played is a fairly close to the table backhand, using the long pips, getting a little bit of wrist movement, some wrist, taking the ball and hitting through, and he's looking to get some more consistency. He's also, I think, mentioned that maybe he can use this as a way to cope against the dreaded no spin balls. And he was hoping for some tips on how to hit this a little bit better. So I took a look at the video and played around a little bit myself on this stroke, and I've got a few tips that I think can help you with the consistency. Now I'm going to just talk a little bit first on the tips, and then I'll do a couple of little demos, so just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. Now, if you look on the original video of the girl playing the stroke, it's just one stroke being repeated over and over again. They've just taken one stroke and copied it over and over. The bounce on that stroke, if you have a look, the bounce is about mid-table, okay, which is good, because what that does is it allows the ball to actually come up, and by the time it gets to where she wants to hit it, the ball's actually come up nicely high above the net. Okay, so it's in a good location for hitting. It's not low below the net, and it's not bouncing very, very deep, so that for her to get to the hit location, she has to take the ball further back. So it's kind of this mid-table bounce that's put it into a perfect position for her, where she can play not far away from the table, so that the actual shot will be effective. It's in your effective range of your long pimples for hitting. It's come up nice and high so that she doesn't have to back off to get to that height. And really, it's hard to tell the spin from it, but I would think it's probably a relatively no spin, maybe a push. It's really maybe a light top spin, but it doesn't look like anything really heavy kicking one way or another. Now, all she really does in this stroke is pretty much stand there, see the ball come, the back goes down, the wrist goes down, and if you notice closely, you'll see she just dips just behind the end line, and then swings forward and upwards, and follows through. So it's really just a bang, and they repeat the clip over and over. So how can we get some more consistency? Well, firstly, look for mid-table balls, because a mid-table ball is going to bounce at about the right slot where you don't have to back off too far. The further you go away, the harder it's going to be to effectively do this stroke with consistency. It's not so short that she's off balance, and it's not too low. The ball's actually bouncing up to a nice, very nice height, and that's going to be important as well, getting that height above the net. So a mid-table bounce, yes. Height of the contact. Now ideally we want to get the ball as high as possible. Okay. The reason being is the higher we can get the ball above the net, the more we're going to be able to hit towards our target on the other table, the less we have to worry about getting it up over the net and dropping it. So the higher the ball goes, the better for us, the harder we can hit it. So that's one thing we're definitely looking for. The amount of spin on the ball and the type of spin on the ball is also important. That's going to affect how hard we can really hit and what we can do with it. And what you can think of in terms of being able to consistently hit the ball with good results, getting it on the table, the higher the ball that is, the higher you can make contact, the harder you can hit. Until it gets to a point where essentially it's so high that extra height really makes no difference. Now, so once the ball's sort of up here to that level, whether it's there, whether it's here, doesn't make a lot of difference. It's still, the net becomes kind of irrelevant. So generally, the higher it is, the easier it is to hit hard and still get consistency. But also the spin type's important, okay? And that works with the ball height, because if the ball from your opponent is a heavy top spin ball, you're going to find it very, very difficult to get any top spin of your own. So the ball will tend to hit your bat, go back with backspin and go in a straight line and float. So again, the more top spin on the ball from your opponent, the higher you really need the ball to bounce. And the problem with the top spin, of course, is that it kicks. So the more top spin on the ball from your opponent, probably the shorter you're going to need that ball to land for you to successfully play the shot. Because if the ball lands kind of here with a heavy top spin, it's going to kick forward, not always up, but definitely a lot forward. And what's going to happen is it's going to be back here before you can get to the height where you can do something effective. And you're then too far away from the table. As the top spin reduces, the height that you can hit it gets lower. And as we start to move into hitting off a backspin ball, when the opponent's putting a heavy backspin on the ball, you can of course hit the ball from a much lower, even below the net, and still get good power, because your opponent's backspin is going to turn into top spin for you off your long pimples or your anti-spin, and that's going to allow you to dip the ball. So we have those two, I guess, two rules that generally the more backspin on the ball, the lower you can hit it from and still make an effective, consistent shot. The more top spin, the higher it's going to need to be. So we've got that range. And then of course the height itself. The higher the ball is, the easier it's going to be to able to hit it consistently and still get good power. So you have to keep that in mind. Now you'll see this line, this is just a measuring tape that I've got sitting here. Now, one thing to keep in mind to increase your consistency, especially if you're having a few troubles, is hit more cross court. Now, of course, that's if you hit all the time cross court, your opponent will expect it. It'll get a little bit less effective. But the point I'm trying to make here is what you can see up until where this measuring tape ends, where my finger basically is. What you can see here is that is actually 2.74 meters. That is the length of a normal table. And if I've just measured this piece of paper so that it shows you that if I actually contact the ball along that diagonal and I hit the ball at the end of the table, at the end line, what I actually gain is, if I hold it up straight, I gain that much extra table to aim at. So in comparison to hitting the ball down the line, if I hit cross court, what I've actually really kind of done is it's like hitting down the line and adding this to the extra bit of table to aim at. That is an incredibly important amount of extra table to aim at. It will increase your safety margin hugely, because what we're talking about here with this shot is there's never a lot of top spin on it anyway. You're not going to generate heaps of top spin. So your normal margin for error, your normal landing area is probably not very big anyway. It's only maybe 6 inches to a foot. By hitting cross court, you're actually adding, what am I adding here? 24 centimetres. I'm adding, what's that in inches? About 10 inches to the table. Yeah, so I can almost double my landing area, in terms of margin for error. I've doubled the amount of table that I've actually effectively got to aim at. That's going to incredibly improve your chances of hitting it consistently. Okay, so cross court is very good, very effective in terms of giving you more landing area. You can't do it all the time because your opponent will get used to it, but it increases our chances and our consistency. Okay, going along in terms of power. Now I mentioned this in regards to the height of the ball, the amount of spin on the ball. But I want to just quickly mention it in terms of its own right. When you're trying to hit this shot, how much power should you be trying to use? And again, it's a matter of being sensible about your equipment, about what's coming to you and what you can really do. You're not going to be able to generate the sort of top spin that you get with inverted rubber. Okay? So the ability to hit the ball amazingly hard and dip the ball very fast isn't going to really happen unless your opponent's giving you a super heavy backspin. So you have to be a little bit more moderate in your use of power. Okay? So forget about trying to belt the ball right through the opponent. You are using 70 to 80% power so that there's enough pace to be effective, and it's going to be the change of pace between your chopping rolling game and suddenly a more hit. 70-80% is going to give you plenty of variation in terms of change of pace without a lot of warning to the opponent, and that's going to give you your effectiveness. You try and hit much harder than that, harder than about 70-80%. What's going to happen is, yeah, you'll hit harder, but you won't get a lot more effectiveness. You're never going to be able to really blast through your opponent from a sort of mid-table ball because your margin for error is too low. If it's up here, sure, bang, whack it. But for these strokes here, about this sort of height, if you're trying to belt the ball, your percentages are going to be too low. So go to 70-80% power and use the change of pace between chop blocking, rolling, and then that sudden just good controlled pace. That's going to be your effectiveness. And if you then are able to move it, the location a little bit as you get your eye in, that's going to be hugely effective without breaking your consistency. In terms of the technique, now I'll do a few myself in a second. Keep the technique simple. Don't mess too much with your technique. It's really just basically a down with a little bit of wrist cock, nothing excessive, don't go crazy, and stroke the ball forwards and upwards. Don't try and spin too much with the pimples. You're not looping with inverted, so don't try and do a backhand loop. I probably would also say don't try and do quite a backhand drive. It's not flat, it's forwards and upwards, so it's that sort of little bit of 45-degree angle, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but nothing excessive, somewhere in the middle. So if you're trying to do too much spin with the pips, you're going to reduce your consistency, and it's not really going to help. So we want fairly solid contact. So those are kind of the things that I wanted to sort of mention with this. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a couple of hits against a float. I've set my robot up to give me a ball with no spin. And you'll see roughly the stroke that I'm playing and the pace that I can play at to be successful given a no spin ball at a certain height. Then what I'll do is I'll just adjust the robot to keep the height around the same, but to give me some more backspin, and you'll see the difference. And then we'll try it possibly with just a little bit of top spin, and we'll see the difference. So I'll just move this stuff and we'll give that a go. Okay, so again, this is against just no spin, and I'm just I'll be obviously trying to find my range first, but you'll see that I'll settle into a groove of reasonable power without anything too excessive. So done the little demos which you would have just seen, and just want to share with you just some impressions from attempting to play that stroke with consistency but still a decent amount of power. Off the no spin ball, I found it very difficult to get any sort of consistency with a fair amount of power. The ball height wasn't all that high, so I really couldn't hit down into the table. I was still having to try and get the ball to dip onto the table, but I didn't have a lot of spin to work off. So I was trying to generate my own top spin a little bit with the pips, and I found that a very difficult option, very difficult thing to attempt, especially going down the line. Very, very tough off a no spin ball that's not bouncing up here but bouncing kind of net height or just a little bit higher. Very, very tough to get down the line consistently. Just my margin for error is not very much. I'm either clipping the net or off the table. Clipping the net off the table. It's very hard to get a consistent one. Across court was a little bit better, but in all honesty, I really, at the level that I was performing that stroke, I would not be willing to try and do that very often in a match. Because as soon as I tried to hit with a little bit of, not full power, but with a little bit of power, I made a lot of mistakes. Now that could be just my technique. I mean, I've never claimed to have a great power backhand with the long pips. So it could be a function that my technique's not great, but I also just found it very difficult, I think, due to the no spin. With the backspin ball, it was a lot easier because I had a little bit of backspin to use to turn into topspin. So that made things a bit, just allowed me to get more consistency and a little bit more power. Again, down the line was a little bit tougher than the cross court, but that was a shot where I felt at least I had a good chance of making the stroke without making too many mistakes. So not too bad. The top spin ball I thought would actually be the toughest. I thought that would be the hardest by a long way, trying to do it off a top spin ball. What I found though, and what you'll probably find again in a match, is that quite often the top spin balls are coming over the net at a higher height. They clear the net by higher. Therefore, even though they may land mid-table, they bounce higher. You know? So, occasionally we'll get a very low topspin, but in general, topspin balls clear the net by more and dip down at the table. What that meant was, even though the ball was bouncing in roughly the same location, I was getting it at a higher point. Because it was at a higher point, it was much, much easier to do the stroke compared to, say, a no spin ball that was low. And so in this case, the extra few inches of height really made the difference, even though I was trying to do it off a topspin ball and trying to counteract that topspin. So the height really did make a difference there, and it wasn't so bad. I think the no spin ball was the most difficult. The topspin ball, because it was bouncing a bit higher, wasn't too bad, and the backspin ball was certainly not easy, but I had the most success with that. One thing, I guess, that's kind of really highlighted of late, since I've been using inverted on my backhand a lot more lately, is one thing I've noticed is that really with the long pips and with the anti-spin, your bat angle has to be much more precise. Your technique has to be much more consistent. I'll include, and you'll probably see it in some of the clips, every so often you'll see me hit the ball way up or way down, where I've really fluffed the bat angle. And not by a huge margin, but by enough to really make that difference. Whereas with an inverted loop, using normal rubber, with the amount of topspin you're putting on the ball may go a bit lower or a bit higher, but it will still land. With the long pips, not so forgiving. It will dive into the net or fly right off the end of the table. So it's much more important to be conscious of repeating your technique with precision, because this stuff's a little bit less forgiving when you're trying to play an attacking stroke because you're generating less topspin. So the racket angle becomes much more important. You haven't got that ability to generate lots of topspin for safety. So focus on, probably if you're going to be playing this shot, focus rather than focusing on excessive power, really focus on precision in your technique to repeat the stroke. And that's going to give you, I think would be, if I was going to be playing the stroke, that would be my key to consistency with this stroke. It's always good, high balls, easier. Backspin balls, easier. You know, cross court, easier. But the main thing's going to be is that you have to be able to repeat with roughly that right bat angle, pretty close, not roughly, but fairly close with long pips or anti-spin. You've got to have that bat angle pretty right, because if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. Okay? Whereas with a topspin ball, with inverted, you've got a bit more room to play with. So focus on the precision of your technique first over power, you'll have a lot more success. And finally, just to conclude, for me, if I was trying to play this close to the table, this is not a stroke I would use very much. It doesn't suit my technique a lot. It really, I like to chop block, I like to roll softly with not too much pace to bring my opponent in, and then I like to hit hard with a big wrist flick. And this stroke doesn't quite work for me. I don't have the technique or the right stroke for it. And so in my game, I would be twiddling and trying to topspin heavy rather than trying to play this stroke myself, because I don't think my technique is not greatly suited. Whereas my training partner, Colin, does play this stroke quite well. If you go back to some of the previous, I think it was 3 month 3, month 4, go back and have another look at Colin's technique when he's hitting. You'll see a much better example of what can be done than my technique. So I'm more comfortable doing a different thing. So again, look for tips for consistency, look for higher balls. The more backspin, the better. Although topspin's not bad, because topspin will give you some more height. Low no spin balls are probably the toughest. And look for, before power, look for precision in your technique. And of course cross court, because getting that extra 24 centimetres of table when you go cross court is going to make a huge difference. So I hope that helps a little bit.